In today's video, we have some updated NHL trade rumors. We're taking a look at teams like the Edmonton Oilers, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Ottawa Senators, and the Arizona Coyotes. We also have news on a couple of veteran goalies who may have to find a new place to keep working. And we also have some updates on some prospects heading overseas, possibly for the entire season. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As you can see, we've kind of come back to recording outdoors here in beautiful downtown Fredericton, New Brunswick. It's been a little while since we've been able to do an outdoor video. The weather hasn't cooperated. It's been really windy, but as you can see today, we have a nice, beautiful, calm day. We've got our beautiful walking bridge here in the distance behind me. It's just a beautiful, lovely day, and I thought, hey, let's get outside and get an outdoor video done because we haven't done one here in a few weeks. Now let's jump into today's news. We have a lot to cover. Now, as I mentioned, we have some updates on some veteran goalies who are going to be exploring free agency and may or may not continue to play in the NHL. First up, we have Anaheim Ducks goaltender Ryan Miller, who is an unrestricted free agent, may or may not return to the NHL. It's been reported that the Ducks are not convinced that they're going to sign him or not. I mean, they very well could go with a much younger option through free agency or through their system. Miller conducted a recent interview where he basically said a lot of it really boils down to, what options are out there. It needs to make sense for him to be in the right environment to do a regular season. So not entirely convinced that he's going to play, but I guess if the right option presents itself, he'll consider it. But it looks like he's also considering retirement. Now, same goes for Red Wings goaltender Jimmy Howard, except he had a little bit of a different tune. Jimmy Howard basically made it clear he fully intends to want to keep playing, and maybe even for more than one season. The Red Wings, I'm assuming based on these comments he's making, have let him know that he will not be brought back. The comments he made seem to accept the fact that his time in Detroit is over, but at the same time, basically made it known that last year obviously was really bad, one of the worst of his career, but a lot of that has to do with the team in front of him. He can't pin all that blame on him, and he just doesn't want to go out that way. Even though he's had a pretty solid run in the NHL, his career stats are pretty good, had a lot of success in Detroit as much as some recent failures, but he just doesn't want to go out on that kind of a low note. So obviously he's looking to regain another opportunity here, and if it means leaving Detroit, he's already discussed that with family, and he's prepared to have to leave home for short term if need be to find an opportunity. So if either of these goalies can find the right free agent opportunity, they will keep playing. Like I said, Howard doesn't sound like he wants to retire, but I guess we'll see what options are out there because there's so many goalies on the market this year between trade and free agency. As we've discussed, we're going to see a bit of a goaltending carousel, and unfortunately some guys might get left behind because there's only so many chairs in the NHL, and we'll have to see if some of these teams want a veteran guy to see if they can bounce back, obviously for a cheap price, I'm assuming here. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have some news on some NHL prospects heading over to play in Europe. Some of it could be for the full year. Some could be just on a loan. Now, just to clarify one thing, we talked about yesterday, Sens prospect defenseman Andreas Englund signing over in Sweden, and I mentioned that it wasn't quite clear if that was a loan agreement or if he would be able to return to the NHL for training camps or whatnot. It's not officially a loan agreement from the Senators, but the contract apparently does have an out clause that he can rejoin the Senators in North America for training camp and try to crack the NHL again, which I'm not really sure he's going to be able to do. So I'm not sure the full terms of the contract, if he can leave and then head back if it doesn't work out or what have you, but not sure he's going to be able to play in the minor leagues this year. Obviously, we're still waiting on a lot of, clarification on how the minor leagues are going to work in North America this year as well. So it wouldn't be surprising if he does stay over there, but he does have the option to get out. We also got news that Red Wing prospect defenseman, former Halifax Moosehead Jared McIsaac, is being sent over to Liga for the season, and he's being loaned, but it's being loaned for the entire year. Obviously, they probably feel like, his odds of making the Red Wings are pretty slim, at least for this year. Except with the uncertainty of knowing what the minor leagues are going to look like in North America, it makes sense that if they have the opportunity for him to play there all year in a league against men, that are certainly older, more competitive than he might be able to get anywhere else, it only makes sense for him to do that for his development. So Jared McIsaac will be playing in Liga for this season. And we also got word that Edmonton Oilers prospect Tyler Benson has been loaned over to the Swiss League. Now, that is a loan with the out clause for him to come back to North America whenever NHL decides to get their training camps going here, which will hopefully be between November and December. So at least they're going to be getting some on-ice action and continue to play and develop here while they continue to fight for an NHL spot. Now, as I mentioned, we have several different trade rumors concerning basically 4 teams today. A lot of it concerns the Edmonton Oilers. So let's start with them. Now, of course, the Oilers have a couple of different priorities that they're really looking at this year. I think obviously upgrading goaltending is a key thing for them. Securing who's going to be that number 3 center. There's been some talk about some changes on the blue line as well, with a couple of their D-men possibly being on the trade market. So they kind of have a lot of balls in the air, a lot of things they could be looking at here. Now, of course, one of the players, though, the big names that they've been rumored to be looking at are some Arizona Coyotes players, including top defenseman Oliver Ekman-Larsson, as well as goalie Darcy Kemper. Now, today's information basically kind of offers an update on the Ekman-Larsson negotiations. We've had several Oiler writers and insiders indicate that those discussions definitely have taken place. So there's a lot of truth to the rumors that they're at least inquiring and having talks. And also, one of the articles here by Kurt Levins made a good point that the Coyotes very well could acknowledge they might have to take back a short-term bad contract to make the numbers work for any team looking to take on that kind of contract. With a flat salary cap and you're looking to send out a player making over $8 million, it's not going to be easy. They might have to retain a little bit, which obviously is, going to be a long-term commitment on their part. At the same time, they may have to maybe even take on a bad contract. Like, so in the case of the Oilers, looking at probably at a guy like Chris Russell. So he only has a year left at $4 million. The Oilers could look to do a buyout, and you know what? They could even trade him in a package to Arizona or another team, and that team could buy him out as well, making him a free agent. So obviously they have some options. It would only help the Oilers cap on a short-term basis, but at least it gets them through another year, gives them more time to figure out the longer-term implications of adding a big-time player of that regard. So certainly, the Oilers are many teams. The Oilers are one of many teams in negotiations for the top defender. So we'll see if anything materializes. Obviously, Ekman-Larsson would have to waive that contract, but if they're willing to take back, a short-term bad deal, and they're able to retain a little bit of salary, even if it's only a little bit, that would really go a long way to making another team make things work, to make the acquisition. So we'll see what happens here and what we learn further on that. Now, staying with the Oilers, we have some additional news as well. I saw some reports that apparently the Columbus Blue Jackets have shown interest in Jesse Puljujarvi. Now, of course, Puljujarvi is a bit of a polarizing figure. There are a lot of different opinions on him. No quite clear answer if he signs and comes back to the NHL this year. Does he stay in Finland? What does he do? Hard to say at this point in time, but obviously if the right opportunity at the NHL comes back for him, I'm sure he'll sign a contract and come over. There's certainly a lot of comments that he's made here in recent months indicating that he would be willing to give the Oilers another chance, and that even though he said before he would never go back to them, that he probably had a change of heart with all the changes they've made there and seen the success they had during the last regular season, what they might be capable of in a playoff run. It certainly makes it interesting to consider the possibilities of going back. Now, if the link to the Blue Jackets being interested is indeed accurate and they do make a strong push, you would imagine that they might offer up one of their goaltenders, seeing that he's well aware that the Oilers are in the market for a goalie. And they have 2 goalies. They're rumored to be trading one. Now, I don't see a goalie from Columbus going to the Oilers straight up for Jesse Puljujarvi. It would have to be a combination of different pieces and packages in there to make things work. But it certainly would be, some interest, I think, from that side, especially if they could pry Korpisalo out of Columbus, which I think, like I said, will take a lot more than just Puljujarvi. But if you factor him in being kind of one of the main pieces, throw in maybe, another high pick or something, I don't see the Oilers moving their first-round pick without getting another first-round pick in return, maybe a later first-round pick, something to that effect. But I don't see them wanting to completely get out of the 2020 first round of the draft. But we'll see what happens if anything materializes. But apparently Columbus does have some interest there in Jesse Puljujarvi. Now, seeing that the possibility does still exist, though, that Puljujarvi signs and stays, I saw another article through the Edmonton Journal talking about the possibility of how the Oilers could fill their number 3 center spot. And you know what? It made a lot of sense, and I just want to present it to you, especially for Oilers fans out there watching this, just to get some thoughts on it. As we know, Minnesota Wild captain and center iceman Mikko Koivu is not going to be returning to the Wild. It's not quite clear if he intends to keep playing or what his status is for the coming year. If he'd be willing to sign a cheaper 1-year veteran contract with a team like the Oilers, would not make sense to have him, one of the highly respected Finns in the NHL, come in to mentor a guy like Jesse Puljujarvi, who could come back to the Oilers, play a third-line role. You throw in a guy like Tyler Ennis, who they're reportedly very interested in re-signing, who's definitely going to be signing a cheap deal. You could probably get all 3 players on your third line for probably $4 million, maybe $4.5 million at most between all 3 players. You could have, like I said, a good scenario where you have a well-respected leader in Finn player in Koivu who could mentor Puljujarvi. You throw in Tyler Ennis in there as well, and you have some speed, you have some skill, you have some good leadership, good face-off guy Would that not make a lot of sense for the Oilers to pursue? I certainly think it would. Like I said, it makes a lot of sense from multiple angles, from the financial aspect of things, from the mentoring side of things, and I just can't help but wonder if they would pursue that or not. But the article I was reading from the Edmonton Journal made a lot of sense, so I wanted to see what you guys thought out there as well. Should the Oilers pursue Mikko Koivu as a number 3 center if he wants to continue playing? And do you think he'd be a great mentor for fellow Finn Jesse Puljujarvi if he indeed does sign and come back as well? Now, sticking with the Coyotes here before we move on to another team, we already discussed Ekman Larsson, but we do have some news from Craig Morgan, who's an insider with the Coyotes, who's indicated that Nicholas Chalmerson has indicated he's not willing to waive his no-trade clause. Now, we had reported before through Darren Dreger and other NHL sources indicating that basically the Coyotes have all players over the age of 25 basically for sale, make an offer, we'll consider it. Well, a lot of them do have form of a no-trade and would have to agree to make those deals happen. And it looks as though that a player like Chalmerson is not willing to go anywhere. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He can play either side of the ice. He's very versatile, pretty solid all-around defenseman. Comes with a good pedigree, has great experience from his time in Chicago as well, and I think would be one of the more highly sought-after players on that team should they, do the full fire sale like was being discussed and reported here. But if he's not willing to waive that new trade, that's really going to put them in a bind, and it's going to make a lot of teams very probably disappointed. I know I saw different teams out there, especially a team like Toronto, other teams as well, who are looking for that defenseman who could come at a decent price and not have to break the bank on, and he's not going to be waiving according to Craig Morgan. So we can look for his name to likely not be on the move, but he will be a free agent next year. And I guess if you think of it like this from his perspective, if he gets traded, there's no guarantee he's going to be able to sign with the team he goes to. He may not want to go to a team and then become a free agent and then move 2 years in a row. So from a personal family standpoint, I can understand how that might make sense. There was reports before as well that Chalmerson actually really liked it in Arizona and that he would be willing to re-sign when his contract was up. So I guess we'll see. I'm not sure if that's going to change or not, depending on the direction of the team and if everything kind of comes to be with all of what is being reported and rumored out there. Now, we also have some updates here on the Philadelphia Flyers. Of course, no big surprise, but a couple of usual suspects that have been in the rumor mill basically for the last number of months are still, again, rumored to be on the move, confirmed by Philly Inquirer reporter Sam Carchidi, who indicates he fully expects the Flyers to pursue trading Shane Gostisbehere as well as James Van Riemsdyk. Now, of course, this comes from a recent mailbag where he's basically answering fans' questions, and I do think that to a degree, they will certainly attempt to do that. I'm not sure that JVR contract is movable. $7 million, not going to be easy. They'd have to throw in some sweeteners, and I really don't have any links or haven't really heard any particular rumors about teams that are, overly interested. I mean, he's a very good player in some aspects, but he's not overly fast. He's good around the net. He can certainly still be a goal scorer in the right situations on the power play, net front presence, that type of thing. But the way the game has changed a bit, I just don't see there being a ton of interest. Now, in the case of Gostisbehere, I do think there will be. He still has a fair bit of term left. It's over $4 million. I think there will be a lot of interest. Now, one team that he was linked to a lot before was Montreal. Now, since they've acquired Joel Edmondson, I don't see that likely being something that they're going to pursue here anymore. They've already kind of gone down the road of making an acquisition. At this point, they have more than enough defensemen. And if the Flyers trade Gostisbehere, I'm not sure they're going to really take a defenseman back. I mean, you could look exactly to a team like Winnipeg Jets, for example. The Jets are probably looking primarily for a top right shot D, but for that price tag, they could certainly use him as a number 2 left shot D behind Josh Morrissey. So I don't have any direct rumors or links to suggest the Flyers and the Jets are having conversations or the Jets are interested, but in my honest opinion, I could see a scenario unfold where the Flyers and the Jets make good trade partners. If you have the Jets, for example, are looking for some help on the blue line in a number 2 center. If the Flyers were able to move Nolan Patrick, for example, of course missed basically the entire season last year, but if he's healthy and he can play and come anywhere close to developing what he was projected to be, he could be a great fit in Winnipeg. He was born in Winnipeg. He's from the area, so it would be kind of a homecoming in sense. So I could see there being a scenario, maybe if you look at like a Gostisbehere and a Patrick trade to Winnipeg. Now, of course, the big question would be what would go back the other way, and that's obviously going to be tough. I mean, I would think at that point the Jets would probably have to include maybe the first round pick. We're probably looking at maybe a guy like Jack Roslovic, maybe a younger piece going to the Flyers, maybe Vesalainen. I'm not sure exactly what they could offer to Philly to make that deal work, but I could just see a scenario where the Flyers kind of have what the Jets are looking for, and that those talks and conversations should be taking place if the Flyers are indeed trying to trade the players that Carchidi's mentioned here in his latest talk. And lastly here we have news from Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun discussing the Ottawa Senators, and apparently they've been quite active in the goalie trade market. Now, as I mentioned before, the Sens obviously are kind of a little bit uncertain on how their goaltending is going to work this coming year. Craig Anderson likely doesn't get re-signed. I assume he probably retires, but like Miller and Howard that we've already talked about, he may not want to quit playing, and if there's an opportunity out there, he may go find it and continue on. I'm not sure, but I don't see his time continuing with the Senators. Now, they've been linked, though, according to Garriock, on several trade talk when it comes to goaltenders, when it comes to like Darcy Kuemper in Arizona. Matt Murray is a big one in Pittsburgh. They've had a lot of discussions with, apparently, and they've even kicked tires on, maybe going into the free agent market, as well as the Columbus Blue Jackets goaltenders as well, like Korpisalo and Elvis Merzlikins. They've had lots of feelers out there. Lots of conversations apparently have taken place. The Senators probably would be willing to part with one of their 3 first-round picks. Pick number 3 and pick number 5 probably not going anywhere, but they do have the Islanders pick, which I believe is now number 28. That one could be in play. They have plenty of prospects, so obviously I'm not sure what those teams would all want for a return package, but don't be surprised if you see the Senators make a big move to acquire a goaltender who can kind of come in and solidify things, even if it's more on a stopgap scenario for 2-3 years while a lot of their other goaltenders develop here. Now, the Matt Murray scenario, he's young enough that he could be their goaltender of the present and the future if he can get back to being consistent, but a lot of that's going to be iffy on what they can work out for a contract with him, and I'm just not sure that would be the best way to go. I would think going with a route like a Kuemper, for example, or an Elvis or a Korpisalo, one of those guys, would be better on a short-term basis. They don't have to give up a longer-term expensive contract, kind of see how things go for a year or two, while there are other younger goalies like Hogberg and Decord and Gustafsson and Mads Sogard, while they all kind of develop here and see what they have, because they have a lot of good-looking prospect goalies. Just a matter of finding out what they have on a longer-term basis. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today. We'll discuss down in the comment section. Should be a very busy trade season. We've already seen a few minor deals, and I expect it to start getting quite busy here after the Stanley Cup final finishes up. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.